Recording live from the virtual Lucky Number 7 Lounge across the internet and through time and space. This is Dine Drink Vegas, the podcast by and for everybody stuck at home, but wishing that they were in the land of neon lights and bad decisions. I'm your host, John, aka the baller on a budget, holding down fort in what is now the West Texas branch office of Dine Drink Travel. And this is episode 29. That's right, we're back after a long delay, and we're going to have a throwdown between Biloxi and Vegas. We'll also tell you what we're drinking today and give you the latest Vegas news and kind of explain why you haven't heard from us in a while. So that we can get to all of those things, now I've got to reach across the internet to an undisclosed bunker somewhere in Alabama where the secret world headquarters for Dine Drink Travel now resides, to talk to the king of comps, the leader in the luxury lounge, the high roller who formerly was of the high plains before he went to Redneckville. It's Bill. Good evening, Bill, and how are you, sir?
Getting much fatter since I've moved to Alabama. How are you, John?
I'm doing well. Grits will do that to you every time.
Say what you will. It's not the grits. They're legally required to serve them with butter and cheese and pork lard. And really the grits are just a delivery device.
As Texans, we think we're Southern. We're not. We're Southwestern. I have lived in the South. I lived in Kentucky for a number of years. There's a lot of things about the South I did not love, the South, as opposed to the Southwest. The food, yes, sir. All of it, all day, every day.
We are quite good at that. Yes, sir.
But I was pushing 400 pounds when I lived in Kentucky because, again, they know what they're doing. So not only is the South the home of the birth of our nation, it's also the home of the girth of our nation. So our listeners, all 7 of them, have not heard us since May. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about why they haven't heard from us and some of the things that are new for you?
So as much as I enjoy podcasting, and I do, that's something I do because I like talking about Vegas and I like sharing my passion for Vegas with other people. In terms of actually paying the bills, I got a new job, which took me to the undisclosed bunker somewhere in Alabama. I have had a delightful time in Alabama, but, effectively starting a new life, right? Like starting a new job, new house, new community. Had to find out where the bars are here, of course, because I'm a civilized person. And that just took a few months to work through.
Yeah. And we also had to rethink how we're going to do the podcast. So we're recording this on a Google Meet. We're only going to release the audio. Look, folks, there's a couple of factors here. Number one, without getting too much into our day jobs, Bill and I are both public servants. Neither of our employers has ever said that you can't do a Vegas themed podcast and have our jobs. It also probably wouldn't make them super happy. So we try not to put our faces out there. Also, we are pasty, doughy white males who are old enough that AARP won't quit mailing us to offer us memberships. If you want pretty attractive influencers to watch, we ain't it. If you need some male eye candy, Jacob's Life in Vegas and Pompsy are both out there. If you need some female eye candy, there's Ruby. There's Norma, but we are nothing to look at.
I disagree, John. I am amazing eye candy, and I would be happy to dance for you right now.
Let's be honest. As eye candy goes, we are like a Werther's original. We are popular in grandma's purse. That's about it at this point. And that's why even in our videos, you rarely see our faces. If you're really curious, you occasionally, when one of us does a room review, you'll see our face in the mirror. Sometimes when Bill does a wraparound of a restaurant, if it happens to be a guy's trip and I'm there, you'll see me and our other knuckleheaded friends. But we try not to put ourselves front and center in the videos because hopefully you're here for the content. Because if you're here for looks, that is a weird fetish, and we recommend you catch therapy.
We're at least better looking than our friends, though, right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Also, mad shout out, Derek. Love you.
You very much do love Derek. All right. So, let's get into some content. So this is our first chance to do this, and we didn't do a lot of pre-planning because we know we haven't put out a new video in a while. So we didn't plan a big recipe that each of us could make in our own labs. So we've fallen back on old fashions, but with the twist of it's fall. and we want to make a fall themed old fashioned. So remembering that an old fashioned is any spirit you want, some kind of bitters, some kind of sweetener served on the rocks. That is it. That is an old fashioned cocktail. Bill, how did you construct this evening's fall themed old fashioned?
So first, I stick by what I've always said, that you've always been wrong about everything. And this is no way a concession that you were ever right about anything. But it is coincidental that you said, what you said about it can be any spirit and I should try an old fashioned with rum at some point.
Yes.
And when I was in Biloxi last week, I had another old fashioned with rum. And it feels odd, as I am in the beating heart of the deepest part of the deep South. I'm not having bourbon in my old fashioned. Tonight I'm having rum. But I had some Florida Cognac 18-year-old with, an orange peel and a brown sugar cube, some bitters and some orange bitters. But then what I did to mix it up a little bit was, instead of a swizzle stick, I put in a cinnamon stick. And that cinnamon stick's putting a really nice kick to it. And it tastes like a fall beverage without the oppressive awfulness of being pumpkin spice anything.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful, actually. And rum and cinnamon go very well together. By the way, little bonus content out there. Those of you who used to like Fireball when you were younger but want something more refined, you can get a bottle of a spiced rum. I recommend using Sailor Jerry's, but any spiced rum will do. You could also do it with an aged rum if you want a more settled drink. But throw that in a mason jar with, 5 or 6 big cinnamon sticks and sugar or artificial sweetener to your liking. Let that hang out in the jar for about a week or so to get all that cinnamon goodness in there. Strain that off, and you have something that is way better than Fireball and will perk up your Saturday morning coffee.
I now know what I'm doing for Christmas, and I thank you very much, Mr. Wilkes.
So I went a different direction with my fall old fashioned. To me, fall means apples. So I poured myself 2 ounces of Laird's apple brandy. Instead of simple syrup, I used about 1.5 to 2 bar spoons worth of maraschino cherry liqueur. Then I hit it with a huge, heavy shake of Angostura bitters and a little Angostura orange bitters to make myself an apple brandy old fashioned. And again, in the 100 proof bottled and bond variety. And that is fall in a glass, I got to tell you.
So you like Angostura bitters at a level which is not healthy. So when you say a lot of Angostura bitters, how much Angostura bitters did you put in this drink?
So I've actually modified the shaker on my current bottle of Angostura so that my one big heavy shake probably amounts to about 5 or 6 shakes from an unadulterated Ango cap. So I didn't go crazy. It's not like I made a Trinidad sour. Although I will say I've gotten brave and done 1 part Angostura to 2 parts of apple brandy and 1 part of some kind of sweetener to balance that bitter. And it is very intense and very spicy, but it's pretty good.
So, and this comment is in the spirit of the drink of the day. One of the things that I like about Alabama relative to your hometown is that the liquor is controlled by the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. So you go to the ABC stores and it's at a set price and you can find it, and the allocated products are on a lottery and it's great. And in most ways it's better. The problem is if the state of Alabama doesn't carry it, you ain't getting it. So stuff like apple brandies, I've got to go somewhere else if I want to find, like, we have what we have and that's what we have.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, with this particular bottle, I haven't convinced any liquor stores in town to carry this, so I have to order it from Curiata. And we are not sponsored because we don't have enough listeners. But if anybody at Curiata hears us, we can be bought. And it would just basically take, you guys could literally sponsor the show and send us the ingredients for the drink of the week, and we would make it and give you free commercials. But I'm giving you a free commercial anyway at this point. The point being, listeners, if you need to advertise on a barely listened to podcast, we will sell our souls, or at least pawn with the intent to buy back. That's a shout out to my friend Sylvia, who I guarantee doesn't listen to this podcast. Anyway, let's move on from the drink of the day to talking about your recent visit to Biloxi, Mississippi, because neither of us have been. Well, actually, I've been to Vegas since you have, and we'll get to my trip report next episode. Took my wife to Vidara over the summer. We'll do an episode on that down the road. But you scratched your casino itch with Biloxi, Mississippi, which is nearby for you. So before we get into the hotel and all of the gambling, let's start by just Biloxi as a town. What's your general feel rolling into Biloxi and spending a couple days?
So my general feel is that I don't need to take American Airlines to get me there. Therefore, it's okay. I was supposed to have gone home to see your lousy face as well as some of our other friends, but American Airlines canceled my flight. I needed something else to do with my weekend, so I wound up in Biloxi. So thought one is I can drive there. And if you're in, roughly speaking, the southeastern United States, it's incredibly accessible to anywhere in Alabama or Mississippi or most of Louisiana. A reasonable drive from some other places. And they've got a good airport with flights from, I know, American and United, and I think Delta. So not Southwest, but the other big legacy carriers. So it's a great choice. And it is the opposite vibe from Vegas because there is, pardon me, because the ocean's right there, or the Gulf of Mexico, rather, is right there. And you can smell the salt water from where any of the casinos are. And I very much like the beach feel to it. Now, the problem is I worry about how long. So in Vegas, you've heard me complain, or not complain, you've heard me worry about the water supply in Vegas before. They have exactly the opposite problem in Biloxi. God presses the reset button on that region about once a generation, right? When a hurricane goes through town. And, I kind of wonder how well those great big massive casino hotels are going to weather that. Right across the street from the Hard Rock is what used to be an Episcopal church, where whatever hurricane came through in 1969, I think it was Camille, knocked down everything but the bell tower. And then Hurricane Katrina, which came through in 2005, knocked down the bell tower, right? Yeah. That's right across the street. So, I kind of wonder about the long-term stability, but it's pretty, right? Like the sidewalks are literally on the beach through most of the hotel zones. And I like fresh seafood. And I realize that high-end restaurants in Vegas will put very expensive fish on very expensive airplanes and fly them out there. And that's not the same thing. So if you've seen the movie Forrest Gump, Bayou La Battery, Alabama is, I don't know, 20 miles from Biloxi, right? Like, I guarantee you those shrimp you're eating were in the water earlier that day. So the seafood's phenomenal. I happen to enjoy the town. And the town's got a different feel from a lot of the rest of the South, partially because there's a massive casino zone and partially because there's an Air Force base right there on the water. And that changes the feel and the composition of the town quite a bit.
Well, and then you talked about the largest immigrant group in Biloxi, which kind of surprised me because I just didn't know.
So I don't know for a fact that it is the largest immigrant group in Biloxi, but what I noticed when I was there was it, and we stayed at a hotel called the Scarlet Pearl, and we'll talk about that later on, but our door hangers, the do not disturb signs, were in English and Vietnamese. And every hotel that I saw, in addition to their steakhouse and seafood restaurant, had an Asian restaurant. If you drill down in the menu, the Asian restaurant was pho-centric and had banh mi and other Vietnamese dishes. So my working assumption is that there's a fairly large Vietnamese immigrant community in Biloxi, because there were Vietnamese restaurants at most of the casino hotels, the 3 or 4 hotels I went into, and it was all the way down to it. That's what the door hangers were in my hotel.
Yeah, and that to me, that's interesting. So that kind of piques my curiosity, and I'd like to check this town out. But let's go ahead and move into where you chose to stay and your room, your opinions about the room, and are we going to get a room review, by the way, and then your general feeling about that property as a whole. So you said it was the what Pearl?
The Scarlet Pearl. So the Scarlet Pearl is a lovely property that I would probably not stay at again. So You want me to start talking about the casino or the restaurants or the like how we got there? Where do you want me to start?
Well, let's start with the room because we generally start with room reviews. So let's go there first. Well, first of all, let's back up a bit about how big a property is it? Because I mean, we're used to Las Vegas with mega resorts, but then we also have downtown where you've got a big hotel with a casino, but nothing massive. Is this more like a downtown property, a big strip property, something in between? Like, in terms of size of this property, what would you compare it to?
In terms of size, the hotels were very, very similar to most of the properties downtown.
Okay.
So on any normal scale, they were incredibly large hotels. They just weren't like the asteroids hit the earth on the Las Vegas Strip, right? Like they weren't the size of the Strip hotels, but they were very large hotels. I went in 3 or 4 of them. On the inside, they were all lovely. From the outside, they all looked great. They were cleaner and nicer than the hotels in downtown Vegas. They weren't as glitzy as the hotels on the Strip, but the size comparison, downtown is probably a better comparison. I mean, these are certainly, none of these places were the size of, say, Caesars on the Strip.
Yeah. Few things are. So overall, like, how would you rate, like, you know, you always have your 5-star hotel, your 3-star hotel. Where would you rank your room at the Scarlet Pearl?
So if the only thing I'm concerned about is the room, it was a lovely room. It was a 4 or 5-star room. The bed was soft and comfortable. The controls were easy. They had a free coffee maker, which turned out to not work, but it was a beautiful, comfortable, safe and secure room. If the only thing I'm looking at is the room, yeah, the Scarlet Pearl was beautiful.
And what, you know, you went on a fall weekend. What was the room rate roughly a night, if you remember?
So I don't know. Here's what happened. It was a long holiday weekend. And on Friday night, I was supposed to have flown home, and that got canceled. So my sister lives here in Alabama for a good chunk of the year. And she and I went out for cocktails that night and were complaining about stuff. And over cocktails, I said, we should go to Biloxi. And then she just got on her phone and she says, okay, I booked us rooms here at the Scarlet Pearl. I'm like, but she said, shut up, I'm going to pay for it. So for me, it was free and it was absolutely worth $0.
Okay. Yeah. The family comp, that's outstanding. All right. Well, let's talk about.
I gathered though, it was the normal weekend rate was probably about $200 or $300. They imagined themselves to be a lovely full service upscale hotel.
And I've got to say, this is one of the things that when we talk about Vegas, because I kind of get, you know, at the risk of going on a rant, you know, I hear people complain all the time about Vegas hotel prices and the resort fees are out of control and all of that. And I get it. It's frustrating that when you look at a property online and you see the room rate, and you got to remember, is this a $50 a night add-on or a $25 a night add-on? I get it's obnoxious, but here's the thing. This just drives home for me that Vegas hotels are routinely a bargain, because on a 3-day holiday weekend, you're not getting the nicer places in Vegas. You could still get the nicer places in Vegas at that $200 to $300 price point, which it sounds like you got in Mississippi. You're not getting that in Dallas.
No.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like, you know, for this size property, you could probably have gotten a room for half that at some of the smaller properties in Vegas.
So I suspect, actually, I know I could have gotten a better deal at either the Golden Nugget or the Beau Rivage, because they're linked with casino loyalty programs in Vegas. And they are pretty aggressive about marketing good deals. So there are absolutely good deals to be had on nice properties.
Yeah. I will say this. I routinely get, about a couple times a year, I'll get an email from MGM, offering me some kind of package deal to fly to Beau Rivage. And generally the flights are not out of my hometown. They involved me driving up to Lubbock, or weirdly over to San Angelo, which has a way worse airport than we do, which is a weird place to fly out of. But routinely, the packages, depending on what airport I have to depart from, for a weekend in Beau Rivage will be somewhere between $450 and $700. And usually it's the flights, the room, and either some kind of dining credit or free play. So if you are hooked up to a loyalty program in Vegas that happens to have properties there. So let's see, that's going to be MGM and Golden Nugget. You and I talked before we recorded. There is a Hard Rock, but it's not on the Unity or Identity, whatever the rewards program of the Hard Rock in Vegas is going to be when they remodel and reopen. This ain't that, right?
Correct.
So the Hard Rock in Biloxi is separate from what the Hard Rock is going to be in Vegas. There's no Caesars properties, we don't think, in Biloxi.
I did not see anything that struck me as a Caesars property.
So
There
basically,
was,
Golden
however,
Nugget,
Jimmy Buffett Margaritaville, and they need me to go drink there.
yeah, I agree. I'm always down for a Margaritaville, which is not long, which is already gone in Vegas now, apparently. So, well, let's talk about dining, because we are Dine Drink Vegas. Like, we do gamble a little, but we're both public servants. It's not like we're high rollers. We tease you about being a high roller, but that's a comparison to me. Because if I win $80, I'm real happy. Like, I have never seen a hand pay. Hasn't happened in my life. So when I call you a high roller, it's because I am such a low roller. You seem like Diamond Jim by comparison. But we are definitely foodies. So let's start with dining. What was the best meal you had in Biloxi?
So and I do want to go back to gambling, because there's an important difference in the gambling in Biloxi.
Oh, we're going to get there.
Okay, fair. No, as long as we're getting there at some point. So the best meal I had, and we wound up only being there for one night, but you know what? Let me look it up. It was in the Hard Rock, and I want to find the name of this specific spot. Something on the half shell. The half shell oyster. No.
Dear listeners, this is the amount of show prep we don't do.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It was in the Hard Rock. Yeah, the half shell oyster house in the Hard Rock was phenomenal. It was a steakhouse, and it was so much cheaper than the high-end restaurants in Vegas. Like, it wasn't cheap. Like, you're not going out for a $5 slice of pizza or something. But it was like the cocktails were between $10 and $14 rather than between 20 and 25, right? Like, we're talking about like that sort of price difference. And it was great. We went for dinner that night to Morton's, the steakhouse down in the Golden Nugget, and it was phenomenal. And no tricks, right? Like, that's Morton's, right? It was great. We had, I almost went to the buffet at the Beau Rivage the next morning, before I went down and had what was ultimately a pretty disappointing meal in my hotel cafe. But no, there are great restaurants there. The thing to know is you need to have an interest in either steak or seafood, because that's what they do well there. Now, they've got restaurants that aren't in hotels, just local restaurants that are across the street. And that's a thing that is harder to do in Vegas. But no, well,
unless you're downtown, then you can get some local flavor downtown. But yeah,
sure, you can. But here it is orders of magnitude easier. You don't have to walk several blocks and go through the shade of people smoking whatever it is they're smoking there in downtown. It's right there and super easy.
Oh, that sounds really inviting. You're selling me on Biloxi. Let's get into that gambling a little bit, because we are a Vegas podcast, and you and I both like to play a little bit.
So, I was at the Golden Nugget, and I was playing quarter video poker, and I was playing 5 quarters. So I was betting $1.25 a hand, and I was playing deuces wild, and I hit the 4 deuces. So whatever, I won $200 or $300 off of that, right? It was great. And at the Golden Nugget, they took I put in my Golden Nugget player card from Vegas. It's exactly the same program, and the comps absolutely transfer, right? Like it is super easy. I'm at the Scarlet Pearl, which spends a lot of time talking about itself as the nicest property, even though I think that's the only one there that doesn't have a spa. On a Sunday night, so not the height of the weekend, not a Friday or Saturday, but still a weekend night of a holiday weekend, most of the table, not all the tables, some of the tables paid 6.5, but most of the tables were paying 3.2 on blackjack, and they were at about $10 a hand, right?
That's reasonable.
Yeah, the table I was at $10 a hand, so you can gamble on a much lower budget in Biloxi than you can. Now, I can't speak to what the comps are like because it's just been a week and I haven't gotten those offers back yet. But yeah, no, I'm glad I tracked it, and I anticipate I will get something from that hotel fairly soon.
Did the slots feel tight, loose? Did you do much slot play?
The slots treated me poorly, but I also didn't play a whole lot of them. Yeah. It was a very similar mix of slots to any other any hotel in Vegas. Like the casino floors felt like the size of a downtown casino, but nicer and prettier like a strip casino. And one thing I will give the Scarlet Pearl, so sports betting is legal in Mississippi, and the Scarlet Pearl had a phenomenal sports bar, right? Yeah. Like if we go on a guy's trip on a football weekend next year, I would absolutely go just sit in their sports bar, place bets on whatever sports ball games, and enjoy the games.
All right. Well, let's move on to a couple other aspects. Let's see. Let's talk about walkability. And I know not everything's walkable, but also taxi and Uber. And then getting on to other properties, because you listed a few other places you got to. So roughly how many casinos are around and how easy is it to get from A to B?
So I saw 8 casinos that were all within a $7 or $8 Uber ride of one another. There may have been some others somewhere else. So where we were, the Scarlet Pearl, the central problem with the Scarlet Pearl is that it was off by itself. So there was no walking from it to another casino. You had to take an Uber. The good news is that Uber was cheap and there were lots of them. Across the water from that, because I was up on the mainland, across the water from it was a place called the Imperial Palace, which looked like it was pretty huge. They had a steakhouse, which is well reviewed up on their top floor, but I didn't go in the Imperial Palace.
By the way, we do need to look into the Imperial Palace and the ownership there. I don't know if you know this, but you probably do because you've been going for Vegas longer than me. But if you'll recall, the Link Las Vegas was once the Imperial Palace.
That is a fair point, and that is worth looking at. So on the Gulf, right next to each other are the Beau Rivage, which is an M-Life property, which looks exactly like a slightly smaller Bellagio, right? There's no fountain, but it's built to look like the Bellagio, and it's immediately next to the Hard Rock. So you can quite easily walk between those two properties with an excellent sidewalk that's not busy in the way that a Vegas one is, and that's across the street from some local restaurants and things. The Beau Rivage is 1.9 miles, and the Hard Rock is 1.7 miles from the Golden Nugget, which is the furthest hotel away. And the Golden Nugget sits in a complex with a Bally's and the Margaritaville and something else. But they're connected by a sidewalk. You could walk if the weather's pleasant, and the sidewalk is right on the beach. So, it would be a very pretty walk if the weather allowed.
Yeah, and I mean, we've all made 1.9 mile schleps on the Vegas Strip. I mean, sometimes you look and you think it's just right there, and then right there is not right there. Well, so that doesn't sound too bad.
This is better than a 2 mile schlep on the Vegas Strip because you can go in a straight line. You don't suddenly have to duck inside a building to go outside because of where the construction project was, right? Like it's a straight line without a whole lot of people, and you can figure out where you need to go. So I'm not saying it's better because there are some distinct advantages to Vegas. I'm saying that Biloxi is way easier to deal with.
I will say this about that walk though, and the advantage of Vegas. And I often have my big trip with my wife in the summertime because we are both public servants who could travel in the summer. You deduce what we do for a living. Uh, as bad as 115 degrees in Las Vegas is, I will take that over 98 degrees and 98% humidity on the Gulf Coast.
Sure.
Yeah.
If it was July, it would probably suck. But if it's October or November, it turns out the weather in South Mississippi is beautiful.
Yeah, I'm sure that was lovely. So we've covered just about everything else I wanted to ask. But let's think about this. So we talked about a lot of pros. What in your mind are the cons of Biloxi?
Biloxi is for you and I are at the young end of the age demographic to which Biloxi is marketing. If you are a 20-year-old person, 20-something-year-old person who wants to go to the club and have a party, you need to go to Vegas. Vegas is there for you. To the best of my knowledge, there are no clubs. There are wonderful bars. There's a great beach. You can do things in Biloxi you can't do in Vegas, like rent pontoon boats. There are no clubs. You can't, in Biloxi, you can't rent a bulldozer on a construction site. You can't shoot an Uzi. You can't do like all of the Vegas is the holodeck where you can do whatever you want. And you can't do that in Biloxi. In Biloxi, you can gamble. Most of the hotels have spas in a way that downtown Vegas does not. So you can gamble, you can go to the spa, you can have steak, you can have seafood, you can go to the beach, you can do water things, like you can rent a boat and other stuff like that. I'm getting close to the end of the list of the things you can do. Now, it turns out I like those things, so I'll go back to Biloxi. But if you want the high energy experience, Biloxi is just not your spot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that I think that paints a pretty good picture. If you've got anything else you want to add, that's great. If not, we'll move on to some Vegas news.
So I guess what I would add is because of where I live, I will absolutely go back to Biloxi because I can drive there in a reasonable amount of time. My heart will always be in Vegas, and my next trip is in Vegas. And I believe we're talking about that Vegas trip a little bit later in this episode. So no, I like Vegas better, but Biloxi absolutely has a spot in the rotation.
Well, and you've inspired me. Sometimes you got to see what's in your backyard. And I have never been to one of the Indian casinos in eastern New Mexico, even though they're a couple hours away. Nor have I been to one in southern Oklahoma, even though I used to live in the Dallas area, and my wife and I spend a fair bit of time in Dallas because her parents are in one of the suburbs. So you've inspired me that I do need to hit up some of the closer to home options just to see what's out there.
So I will end with that. Biloxi is not Vegas, but Biloxi is infinitely better than the casino resort properties in Oklahoma and New Mexico or in other places like that, partially because there's more than one there, partially because they are, large scale commercial properties. I like Biloxi much more than the sort of gaming and recreation experience you're describing in Oklahoma and New Mexico and other places.
Okay, that's good to know, but I'm going to check them out anyway because I'm curious. So I don't know when I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that at some point, which I may not, but I said I would. All right, let's jump into some Vegas news and notes, and we're going to start with F1 season is in full swing in Vegas. They've already boarded up the walkways, this time with looks like metal plating to obstruct views from the walkways over the strip. And the grandstands are up, which means you can't see the fountains at Bellagio unless you're in the Bellagio. Bill, what do you think about F1 season in Vegas?
I'm thrilled that people who like that have something to watch. But what that means is there's however long it is, there's several months a year where I just don't want to go to Vegas because I don't want to deal with the construction and the hassle. And I certainly don't want to be there during race time. Like if it's F1 season or the couple of months before F1 season, and you want to go to something like Vegas and you don't care about F1, that is absolutely the time of year to go to Biloxi.
I will say this. It sounds like they've gotten it down to basically a month. They start this roughly at or after Halloween. The race will be in late November. It'll all be gone by mid-December. So it's a little more than a month now. I don't think if I had the time to travel to Vegas right now, I would go. It just wouldn't be a strip trip. This is a great time to go downtown. I've always wanted to check out Red Rocks or some other resorts. I think I would avoid the strip during F1 season. I don't think I would avoid Vegas.
Yeah, I see your point, right? Like,
Yeah.
I see your point.
But if I'm on the strip, I want to see the fountains. I don't have time for that. All right. The culinary strike, not the culinar strike. I must have been thinking about Star Trek when I wrote this. The culinary strike at Virgin is still ongoing. However, there are various reports from various news outlets that a large number of the employees who unanimously voted to strike are crossing the picket line of scabs and working anyway. Let's use that as an opportunity to talk about the Virgin. What do you make of that situation?
So I think that hotel is challenged by being just far enough away from the strip that it's inconvenient to walk. Like the whatever. And certainly if there's going to be picket lines and hassle, I wouldn't want to go right now. Like, I've been in there. It's a beautiful property. The drink service there is particularly good. But yeah, I mean, to me, the Virgin's just not worth the hassle most of the time, unless I happen to be going to that German restaurant catty corner across the street from it.
Yeah, which Hofbrauhaus is great. And Derek, we're sorry. But yeah, I got to say, the thing about the Virgin is there's a lot of good restaurants in there, and they do a lip smacking and finger licking foodie tours. Both do foodie tours on that property. I don't want to go when there's a culinary strike, and I tend to be sympathetic to food service and hospitality workers in Vegas when they want more wages, because we see the amount of profit these properties make. The workers deserve a fair share. That said, I don't think Virgin's making that kind of money. Like, Virgin is actually firing the company that's been running the property because it's going so bad. They have a problem getting a crowd. With all due respect to the union, I'm not sure there's any blood left in that turnip. But until they get better management and figure out ways to get people in there, I don't know that they got the money to pay more. I don't know. Maybe somebody who knows better will tell us different in the comments. If you're mad at what I just said, I do apologize. I'm not trying to be ugly, just based on observations as a random tourist with a barely listened to podcast.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the financial situation at the Virgin, but I think that they're so far away from the strip that they've got to do something pretty spectacular, and I don't see that happening right now.
So the next news story won't matter to a high roller such as yourself, but for ballers on a budget everywhere, it's been a sad week with the announcer that Ocean One at Miracle Mile, home of the 3 drinks for $12 and the $7 lunch, has closed again, this time apparently for good, or at least until they find another place to set up shop.
So that's one of the things that Vegas is distinctly better at than Biloxi is cheap places to eat a lunch or something. And those places exist in Biloxi, but the hotels are trying to all present a high-end image. So it turns out they mostly only have high-end stuff. Now that stuff is way cheaper than the equivalent product in Vegas. Like, it's way, way cheaper. But there's not the $12 for 3 drinks sort of thing.
I get that, but I also would imagine that walking out of your casino a block down to a mom and pop shop selling an oyster po' boy probably works out pretty good as a cheap lunch. And I think that's one of the things that the strip is doing increasingly poorly from the baller on a budget point of view. There's a lot less to do for a budget on the strip. Downtown still has your back, but the strip, you got to get creative to save a few bucks on a decent meal. I mean, unless you want like one of those Casino Royale hot dogs, there's not a lot of cheap eats left on the strip.
Shut your filthy mouth. No, you do not want that hot dog. No.
It's not that bad. All right. To other news, we reported, well, we didn't report, we repeated, other people reported, mostly Vital Vegas because Scott knows everything, that Banger Brewing went out of business a while ago. We love Banger Brewing. You and I and the other guys we go on dudes trips with would buy that Groupon all the time. Actually, usually I would buy it and just give it to y'all because it was a really good deal. You got a lot of beer pretty cheap in a souvenir glass that we probably would break before we got it home, but at least you had a nice glass in your hotel room. It closed a while ago. There's a southern place called Hush Puppy, which has a long track record in Vegas, but apparently has gone downhill under new ownership. But they're putting in a deep fried location where Banger Brewing was. So even if it is subpar, Southern boys that we are, you think you could see yourself stumbling in for some hush puppies and catfish at 3 a.m. when you're downtown?
So I'm going to speak slowly, John, in case you missed the first half hour of this podcast. I live in Alabama. I just traveled to Mississippi. No, I'm not going for Southern comfort food in Las Vegas.
I will eat a basket of hush puppies on Fremont Street. I will do it. I probably don't want the fish, but it's hard to mess up a hush puppy.
Yeah, okay, and fair, but what you can also eat cheaply on Fremont Street is some world-class pizza or something like that. No, given where I live now, I don't eat, so I will always be a Texan. And as a Texan, I don't eat Texas-style things because they're going to be terrible. Now, having, in places that aren't Texas, and if they're in Texas, they don't call it Texas-style food, they just call it food. Now that I live in Alabama and travel to Mississippi, no, I'm not going to a Southern style anything. I'll just go home. There is a guy here named Greg who's got a breakfast spot. And just, you know what? I'll go visit my friend Greg. That's what I'll do.
All right. I will say I once berated a waiter at a Texas-themed steakhouse in Kentucky that didn't have chicken fried steak on the menu, and he tried to lecture me on how good Texans wouldn't do that to a cut of meat, and he did not realize he had a depressed, homesick Texan at the table. I do apologize. Steve from the Reno's Roadhouse in Nicholasville, if you're hearing this, I'm still sorry, my dude. I was out of bounds. All right. Moving on, let's see. Scott at Vital Vegas reported earlier today that the sad imitation of a Senior Frogs at Treasure Island is on the way out. Bill, you and I have both been to Senior Frogs in Cozumel and Cancun. Yeah, at least yes. Cozumel. The one at TI is just sad, isn't it?
It, on the one hand, yeah, it's sad. On the other hand, our friend Melissa tried to kill us at Senior Frogs in Mexico, and for all I know, I'm dead right now, and that's never happened to me at the Senior Frogs in Vegas.
That's because nothing happens at the Senior Frogs in Vegas. It is the most boring place on the strip. And I hope it burns in restaurant hell. Okay. And finally, this is old news. It happened over the summer. The announcement dropped over the summer, but we haven't podcasted since then, and I wanted your take on it. The announcement came after rumors that it was going to close altogether. That Bizarre Meat is going to leave Sahara and wind up in the Palazzo coming in 2025. I've not eaten at this place yet, but you have. Bill, do you think this is a good move for Chef Jose Andres and his fine establishment?
So I've got a review of Bizarre Meats up on the Dine Drink Vegas YouTube channel. I liked Bizarre Meats. Now, here's what you've got to know. If you're expecting Jose Andres, you're not going to see him. When I ate there, I ate at the bar. It's been a year and a half now, but I ate at the bar and it was phenomenal food. Like I absolutely want to go back. But the bartender, I asked her, hey, how often does Jose Andres come here? And she says, oh, every year. And I said, well, when he comes, how long does he stay? And she said, all night. So what that means is that Jose Andres is just better than theoretically aware that he's got a restaurant. in Vegas. Now, I will say the grilled meat was phenomenal. The gazpacho I had was outstanding. Like, I still remember the grilled pork. Like, that's one of the few places I will go and I will intentionally order pork rather than beef. It is a great restaurant, and being closer to the center of the strip, I'm likely to go to it more. I think it's a real loss for the Sahara because the Sahara is further up north. It's more isolated and needs some high-end things like that. So I'm really curious. It's a loss for the Sahara, and I want to see what they're going to replace it with. But I think it's exactly the right move for Jose Andres because I think he'll get more traffic if he's further south on the strip.
Yeah, I do. It's on my bucket list of places I want to go eat. The only Jose Andres owned place I've ever eaten at, and we'll get to this in the next episode. My wife and I ate at China Poblano during their cocktail hour at the Cosmo. Phenomenal experience. I generally don't eat Mexican food in Vegas. I definitely don't eat barbecue in Vegas because they're probably not going to get brisket right. But I got to say, China Poblano, really good stuff. So I want to check out Bizarre Meat when it moves down there. All right, Bill, we've covered news for us. Let's give the listeners a little preview. I have 2 trips to Vegas booked for the remainder of this year. I know that you and I share one of those trips. So coming up in January, we are headed downtown to the
Plaza, where I am super excited. The Plaza has the best gambling rules in Vegas. Actually, it is, that's only arguably true. You could say that the El Cortez has better gambling rules, but the El Cortez is a dumpy place. The Plaza, on contrast, is a lovely place, and the Sand Dollar Lounge is a phenomenal place to sit and have a cocktail. I tend to like that end of the Fremont Street experience better, and the gambling rules there are still very, very good. So no, I am absolutely looking forward to that trip to the Plaza. And at some point when we're not on this podcast, John, we need to figure out a little bit more about where we're eating when. Just so you know, though, if it's lunch, I'll be the fat kid in front of the pizza counter.
Yeah, and downtown is phenomenal because there are 3 really incredible pizza places, Pizza Rock, Pop-Up Pizza at the Plaza, and Evil Pie. You and I have debated many times which is better, but in my mind, it's 1A, 1B, and 1C. It's not a huge gap between the 3 when it comes to grabbing a slice to go. Now, for a sit-down experience, it's Pizza Rock all day, every day, because that menu is expansive. But for the slice to go window, I think we both probably say Pizza Rock 1A, and then 1B and C, we might flip-flop on Evil Pie and Pop-Up Pizza. But there's 3 truly phenomenal slice places. And honestly, that little hole in the wall in the middle of Fremont Street where there's a pizza shop and a taco stand, I think the tacos are better, but the pizza's still serviceable. Like, it's hard to get a bad slice down on Fremont.
Yeah, at that spot, you absolutely go for the tacos. And in terms of my 1A, honestly, it's a function of it for carryout, because you're right about sit down. But for carryout, it's a function of where am I? Because if I'm getting a single slice of pizza because it's 9 or 10 in the evening, I've probably made choices. And the extra 400 or 500 feet to get to whichever one is second closest is probably a big deal. So honestly, if I want a slice, I just go to whichever one's closest to me right then.
Yeah, I agree. I do think one of the nice things about Pop-Up Pizza is if you're sitting inside of the Sand Dollar Lounge, they have some different menu options that are not available at Pop-Up itself, which is just the other side of the wall. And it's kind of aggravating, but also kind of cool. I like that a lot. And by the way, I'm a video poker player. I will say generally, because they do occasionally change pay tables, generally the video poker odds are better inside the Sand Dollar than on the floor at the Plaza. Video poker is definitely better downtown than it is on the strip. But in the Plaza, the pay tables vary from spot to spot. I haven't tried the smoke-free place yet. I'm looking forward to that. I want to gamble in that smoke-free room. I love Park MGM. I like being in a smoke-free environment. Don't get me wrong. You and I will go grab a cigar while we're in Vegas. But I like being in a smoke-free room to gamble for a while. I want to check out that smoke-free place. And I haven't played video poker at the Carousel Bar yet. I haven't drank there yet. So I love the Plaza. I haven't been there since those things came online. I'm looking forward to that. They've only redone one tower. So the Lux rooms, I think we both booked Lux rooms. Those are the remodeled rooms. The other tower still has the deluxe rooms. They need refreshing, but they're still nice, but they definitely need an update. We're doing Oscars while we're there because you got to. We
That's
haven't
the rule.
we haven't ironed out all the other meals. Maybe we'll stay after we quit the recording and chat that up. But yeah, I'm super excited about the Plaza. Can't wait to tell our listeners about those experiences. And in the summer, my wife and I are stuck in a debate between staying either, well, really, Vidara again or the Cosmo, and they're right next to each other. And if you're at Vidara, you really get the best of being at Aria and Cosmo at the same time, right? Which is cool. But we also have some really good offers to stay at the Delano and to get the VIP package down there. So the wife and I are in a debate whether we're going to do. Right now we have Cosmo booked. We may bail on that. She likes Vidara because I make her breakfast in bed because there's a kitchen. We'll talk about that next episode. But also the wave pool and the VIP lounge at Delano are calling our name. And the prices are low right now because it's about to convert over to the W. So by the way, little baller on a budget tip. If you've never stayed at the Delano because it's a little past your budget, book now. MGM has dropped those prices. As soon as it swaps over to the W, I guarantee those prices go up. So if you want in that space on a budget, I'm telling you, now's your opportunity. That's your baller on a budget tip.
That is a phenomenal tip. Well done, sir.
Well, with that, let's bring this episode to a close. So we are Dine Drink Vegas. We are back. We will be bringing you content as close to an every 2-week window as we can. We promise not to take half a year off again. And if you're looking for content, which may get a little more variable with some other things to compare to Vegas along the way, Bill, where can they find us on social media?
You should go onto our YouTube channel, which is Dine Drink Vegas, and then you can find us on all of the social sites at Dine Drink Travel.
And you can find me at Dine Drink John on Twitter, X, whatever Elon wants to call it now, before it turns into Doe's website of just whatever Elon feels like saying, and we all wind up at other places. But until then, thank you for listening. Catch us on social media, and we will see you next time.